Welcome back to the Native Speaker Lightning Lessons. Here we're going to look at some more common mistakes and how to avoid them. And here we're going to look at I am Agree-2. In our first video on Agree, we saw a pretty typical and common mistake. I am agree with you that it is expensive. You are agree with him about the protests. She is agree about everything and they were agree about nothing. Now this is a very common mistake. Students put in a be form here in the present simple or in the past simple, and this isn't acceptable. This is a big mistake and it looks really bad. So you make sure you don't do this. I agree with you that it is expensive. You agree with him about the protest. She agrees with everyone and they agree about nothing. That's the correct form. One of our students said, but wait a sec, I've heard some sentences using be with agreement. Haven't I? Or have I? Yep, you have actually. Now let's have a look at some examples. In this example, which is more formal, we're going to use the word agreement, the noun agreement, not the verb agree. And we're going to use the verb be over here. So the Prime Minister is, Apple are, our government is, Apple seem to be, the Taoiseach was. Taoiseach is the Irish word that we use for Prime Minister. You will often see it in international broadcasts and newspaper articles. So it is a word from the Irish language. It's pronounced tea, like cup of tea, and shock, like electrical shock. So the Taoiseach. So you'll need the preposition in before agreement and the preposition with after agreement. Sometimes we might add an adjective like complete or total before agreement in order to give it emphasis. Then you'll say who you agree with, what person, what company, or what idea you agree with. And then you'll use the preposition on for people and companies, or the preposition of if it's a concept, an issue, an idea, etc. Students often ask about why is it Apple are in agreement with? Why isn't it Apple is in agreement with? Well, you can do both. Apple is in agreement with means you're talking about the company as an entity, and Apple are in agreement with means you're talking about its senior managers, its management team, its company, the people. If you say people, Apple seem to be, so there's an option here between Apple are and Apple seem to be. Apple are suggests that you're 100% sure that they're in agreement with Google, and Apple seem to be in agreement with Google means this is just your opinion and you think you're right. So there might be a 70% certainty but a 30% doubt when you use seem to be. This is a very valuable mechanism when you're writing academic writing. So for example, essays, assignments, thesis, if you're not 100% sure and you're being asked for your opinion, then this is a good way to use it. It's also excellent in IELTS exams in the essay and in the speaking section when you want to show that you're capable of hedging techniques, to show that you're not 100% sure and how you would communicate that in your language. Here we see our government is, and students would say, well, why isn't it our government are? It's optional also, because Apple and our government and Google indeed are group nouns, and that makes it optional to use either are or is. Now that doesn't mean that it's a freedom festival, okay? It means that if you use are here, if you use pronouns or verbs later in the sentence connected to this, they must stay in agreement with that original decision. So if you said Apple are in agreement with their decision, not its decision, okay? Alright, so here you can see that there's a lot of detail. There'll be some form of be here. If it's in the past, it was, and then it'll be in agreement with. So that's something, see, identify that pattern there. In agreement with, in agreement with, in complete agreement with. If you're speaking with more emphasis, you can say in complete agreement with, in total agreement with. So if you want to add emphasis, you add one of these two adjectives. They're pretty common in this case. And then you'll say the person or the company that you agree with, and you'll say on what topic. So on. But if it's an idea, the concept of, the subject of, the question of. Then later here you can introduce the topic by saying the subject of media intrusion. Now you could go directly and say in agreement with the Queen on media intrusion, But I feel the subject of, the issue of, the concept of, the question of, these are first of all very natural. Native speakers often use them. They like the flow it brings to the sentence, so that's one reason why you should do it. And it'll also help you in Cambridge exams like IELTS, Cambridge for Certificate, Advanced and Proficiency. You get marks for lexical resource, the quality of your vocabulary, and you'll get marks for cohesion. That means a good way of linking sections of the sentence and sections of paragraphs together. So bear that in mind. So they're not essential, but they do help and they're high quality. You'll notice up here that I've said gerund subject in brackets for gerund, and gerund is when a verb ing is used like a noun. So ensuring user privacy. So the issue of ensuring user privacy. The question of doing trade. And again, this is high value marks in any Cambridge exam. If you're trying to improve your career prospects by having an internationally recognized English language qualification, this kind of language is what helps you when you're all alone in the middle of that exam. Then you'll add the complement to finish out the sentence and give it the rest of its meaning. Let's have a look at some examples. The Prime Minister is in agreement with the Queen on the subject of media intrusion into the lives of the royal family. Intrusion is the noun of intrude. Intruder is the person. Intrusion is the action. And intrusion is where you come into a place where you're not welcome or invited. Apple are in agreement with Google on the issue of ensuring user privacy as regards social media usage, or Apple seem to be in agreement with Google on the issue of ensuring user privacy as regards social media usage. Our government is in complete agreement with the concept of human rights for prisoners all over the world, and the Taoiseach was in total agreement with the UK Prime Minister on the question of doing trade with countries outside the EU. So there you can see how to build this sentence. You'll need a be and then an in before agreement and a with after agreement. You can add adjectives for emphasis like complete or total in here before agreement as well. And then if you're talking about a person or entity or company, you'll use the preposition on. But if it's an idea like the concept of, the issue of, the subject of, the question of, and you put that in here, then it must be of. So there's a little bit of detail. I would advise you to get a pen and a ruler and draw out your own table. Draw out these columns. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 columns. Draw them out and give about the same as I've done here, 5 examples, and do it slowly and correctly the first time. Sometimes students mistake the simplicity and the candy colors of this table with understanding it. You might need the map for the first couple of journeys, so use the table as your map. And there's nothing better than drawing out your own table. It might not be as colourful and as fancy schmancy as the table you see on the screen, but it will give you very good ownership of the sentence, and you'll be able to spot your mistakes more easily. So pay attention to that. Sometimes students jump into the sentence too quickly, being overconfident that they say, yeah, I'll get this right. And you know what? It just might be a good idea to take the map with you for your first 5 journeys. As in, excuse me, earlier examples, I mentioned to you that if you want to take out the object here, you can, but you know what? And then you would, of course, take out with, but you know what? It's much better just to leave it in there, I think. It just, in this sentence, it just helps the flow of the sentence, you know. Now, maybe if it mentioned the Queen immediately here before the Prime Minister, then maybe you don't want to repeat it. But, you know what, if you could, I'd leave it in. So how about, say my students, I want to say I don't agree with something. Easy peasy. I don't agree with you that it is expensive. I didn't agree with him about the decision, and she won't agree to a price increase. Don't say stuff like I am not agree, I was not agree, she is will not agree. I know you might think this looks absolutely crazy now that you've seen it in this kind of situation, but you'd be shocked at how many good students come up with this kind of stuff in their IELTS essays or even in their speaking practice for the speaking section. And it is really expensive. So make sure you are not one of the students who make this mistake. Say it like this instead. And to build a more complex and formal sentence, absolutely, we can do that. And we'll show you when you watch our next video. If you'd like to know more about all the ins and outs of this and other language points, sign up now for our online course at info@nativespeaker.ie, and you'll never have to make this mistake again. That's all from this Native Speaker Lightning lesson. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. See you all next time.